There is a silent killer that affects our spiritual walk and hampers our ability to help others. Some have referred to it as plank eye syndrome, or plank eye syndrome, literally. Jesus spoke of it in the Gospels, and today we discuss it on Soul 02. And welcome to Soul 02. This is the podcast that is putting the oxygen back into the Christian walk one soul at a time. And today we're discussing plank eye syndrome, and I think you might know where we're headed with this. It says in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 3, it says, of course, Jesus speaks of this, and he says this: "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." And so we have this scripture before us that speaks about being judgmental. Now, there's always been a debate about, I've seen some streams online of, hey, we have to judge, and there's a difference between judgmentalism and judging fruit. And spiritually, we need to judge fruit, right? As Christians, in Christian community, we need to judge fruit and make sure that people are obeying Jesus and following him, and then, hey, challenge him on it and say, hey, brother, sister, you need to make this right or whatever. That's different. On the other hand, when we are judgmental of other people, that borders on the idea that we're judging their souls. And judgmentalism is accompanied with a general lack of love, whereas judging fruit is not. Judging fruit should have and always has love, should always have love. Today we talk about not judging fruit, but judgmentalism. And there's plenty of that in the church. And I can speak from my own experience growing up, young in my faith. I was extremely judgmental of people. And it was my own insecurity and my own immaturity. But I want to talk about this today because it's so important in our lives. And there is something to be said that when we condemn people, right? And, it's different than judging fruit. But I want to come to this idea that what condemning others tells us about ourselves. What does condemning others say about us? It shows us, number one, how blind we are. We cannot see people clearly because we're not aware of the fault in ourselves. That's why we can be so judgmental, because we're, to the measure that I'm hard on people, I'm soft on myself. And I'm overlooking my own faults. And again, I'm talking about being judgmental. I'm not talking about, helping people to grow and challenging them. The word speck there, when it says, why do you worry about the speck in your brother or sister's eye? It literally means a tiny splinter. So it's like seeing a tiny splinter in someone's eye and saying, hey, let me get that, while there's something terribly wrong with our eye. And so the speck speaks of something insignificant, something small, our neighbor's minor faults. But then plank is another Greek word that speaks of literally a beam or a rafter. And it speaks of our big glaring sins, our obvious sins and faults, in comparison to our brother's faults. My vision becomes clouded by my own sins. That's why it's so important for us to be sober in ourselves and to know where we're at before we look at somebody else. So it shows how blind we are, but it also shows this. It shows our tendency to find fault in others while excusing ourselves. We tend to criticize in others what we excuse in ourselves. And that's human nature. When David was confronted by Nathan, and Nathan set him up with his metaphor of this guy that abused this poor guy, this rich guy abused a poor guy, and he stole the only lamb he had so he can give it to his guests. And David was absolutely enraged. And at that point, he says, that man needs to die. And Nathan says, you're the man. And what was he doing there? He was using a metaphor for David to expose his own heart of how easy it was to look at someone else's faults and not his own. Criticism exposes our hearts. The more we criticize, the more we are exposing our own glaring sins. It also shows us this. It shows us our hypocrisy. And again, Jesus called people who do this hypocrites. And we've all been hypocrites when we judge others unlovingly and without hope. And we don't look at our own faults. We don't look at how loving God has been to us and how forgiving and how patient he's been to us. And condemnation confirms one simple fact, that I'm a hypocrite, that I'm not being honest, I'm not being real. You've heard the old saying, it takes one to know one. When there is something wrong with someone else, or everyone else for that matter, there's a sign that there's something terribly wrong with us. And there are people sometimes online who all they do is criticize and tear down, but they don't know how to build. They don't know how to give hope. They don't know how to encourage. They only know how to correct. And that's a sign of not only maturity, but hypocrisy. And we find that, and here's a quote by R.T. France. He said, the hypocrite's error is not in his diagnosis, but in his failure to apply to himself the criticism he so meticulously applies to his brother. And that's why people who have truly had a vision of themselves, like when Moses said to God, don't let me see my own wretchedness, people who have seen themselves are very hesitant and careful of how they criticize others because they know of their own frailty and imperfection. But one more thing it shows about ourselves when we judge, and that is this: how ugly the condemnation of others becomes. When you don't think about it, of how you treat other people, it's impossible to judge others without having our own sense of contempt and self-righteousness. That's what it really reveals, not just hypocrisy, but our own self-righteousness, our own pride, our own contempt for people, and general lack of love and kindness, which is what we're commanded as believers to have for each other. And Matthew 7:1, again, let's read it again. It says this: do not judge, or you will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. And what's he saying there? That the rule that you use for others, how you treat them, is going to come back on you. So we have to be very humble and kind to each other, right? Even if we're dead right and know that someone is wrong. Judging others turns us from accusers to defendants on the witness stand, where we're the ones really judging ourselves. So what's the plank eye rule here? Jesus gave us the rule of the plank eye, and thanks to AI, we have some nice pictures now. But what's the plank eye rule? The plank eye rule is this: it is the idea that you condemn others. You can't condemn others, rather, until you yourself are perfect. Perfect doesn't mean sinless or without fault. The only person who can help someone with a fault is someone who has been well aware of their own faults and has received forgiveness. Then you realize how kind and gentle God was with you. And now you do the same for someone else in a fault. This is why Galatians puts it beautifully. It says in Galatians 6:1, I'll just read it to you. My friends, if anyone is detected in a transgression, you who have received the Spirit should be detected. And let me just give this to you here. Have it right there. Well, I thought I had it, but okay, we don't have it. That's all right. Let me put it to you this way. Let me just say this. that the only person who can help someone else is someone who has themselves been forgiven, and they realize their own stuff, their own faults, their own imperfections, and then they go to God and say, Lord, give me mercy. And so the plank eye rule is this. I'll give it to you this way. You can't condemn others until you are perfect. And that's why 1 Corinthians 11:31 says, but if we judge ourselves, or if we judged ourselves, we would not be judged. So think about this, right? Perfect implies that when you judge yourself, you're going to approach someone not judgmentally, but in kindness and saying, man, I want to see restoration. I want to see healing here. Not some mean-spirited thing that you see online a lot, which is Christians can be so cruel to each other. But also you find this idea. Plank eye rule number 2, our goal must be redemptive, not destructive. Galatians 6:1, my friends, if anyone is detected in transgression, you who have received the Spirit should restore such one in a spirit of gentleness. Take care that you yourselves are not tempted. When we don't do it right, we will be tempted. We will be sucked into something that is not healthy when we become judgmental. So I want to challenge you with this today, that your goal has to be redemptive, not destructive. We must understand that there is only one true judge. And I think I have one more I want to give you, one more scripture. James chapter 4:11 and 12. Do not speak against evil against one another, brothers and sisters. Whoever speaks evil against another judges another, speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, then you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver and judge who is able to save and destroy. So who then are you to judge your neighbor? Man, that's a mouthful there, isn't it? So when I become judgmental, I stop being someone who's walking in obedience to God, and I become a judge. God has never called me to be a judge, has he? And so we have to understand that there's only one true judge, and that's Jesus. So I hope this podcast blessed you today. If it blessed you, please leave a like, and you can find us on YouTube, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Facebook, and others places you can get your streams. So till next time, it's so great to be with you. God bless you.